Badlands, right into Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another installment of the Devolution recap series. I'm pretty excited about this one and the next few, actually. I'm excited about them all, but this is going to be a fun one because it's about Crowdstrike, and Crowdstrike is a company that has been brought up in the series multiple times, and it's kind of been brought into the zeitgeist recently, like just a month ago. So it's very relevant, very topical, and this should be a pretty good discussion, but there are things I got wrong in this article. So we'll talk about all that. We'll go through it. I believe I'm live on Locals if it's working. And so I will, yeah, I am. So I will be going to do a quick Q&A over there after the stream is over. So before we get into the article, let's get a quick word from our sponsors of today's show.
Are you a business owner who's overworked, frustrated with the employees, and seem to just be spinning your wheels? Probably not what you signed up for. Starting a business is very different than managing and scaling a business. You have the ability to make your business work for you rather than the other way around. I can help you and your business with a unique three-step process to scale your business to the next level. Here's my client, Domenico Ponti.
I met a gentleman by the name of Kerry Prejean. I was looking for a fractional CFO. What I got is much more than that. I got a person who lets me vent and listen. He's allowed us to build structure, gave us courage because of his contributions. His ability to correct and find mistake was a wow for me. What takes Carrie 5 takes me 30 or maybe more.
Book a meeting with me, discuss your goals and situation. Let's start fast tracking your next level of success.
Awesome. Thank you, Carrie and Strategic Business Advisors. Next up, we got City Zoo. And I absolutely love this book, guys. I'm loving it more and more the more I read it. Sponsor City Zoo is an unfairy story by Jeff Pettigo. That's Captain Sesh Kethel's reclusive map guy. City Zoo is an allegorical fable like George Orwell's Animal Farm, but instead of being a fable about the Russian Revolution, it's an allegory about the color revolution now underway in the United States. But City Zoo is less about politics than it is about the unique culture of the U.S., and the way our news media have been monkeying around with it. So City Zoo is essentially why Badlands Media exists in the first place, because our media was so bad, we needed to find a way to replace them in a sense. City Zoo presents an animalized history of the USA and its unique culture, but when a suspiciously Trumpian elephant called Gus decides to run for animal zookeeper, the news media made up of shrieking, dung-throwing monkeys go apeshit. Lastly, in relevant to Devolution Part 11 here, City Zoo explicitly calls out China and their participation in the subversion of our culture. The author would like to thank the Devolution and Badlands communities for selling out Amazon's entire inventory of the hardcover. More are on the way, but the ebook is only $10 right now, so you can buy the ebook whenever you want and get the hardcover later. If all of us bought the ebook, City Zoo would make the top 10 in literary satire, so we can make that happen. Badlandsmedia.tv/cityzoo. And then incidentally, Kirkus, the famous book reviewing place, reviewed City Zoo recently, and they gave it a glowing review, then ended on a decidedly sour note. The author senses some bias on the part of the reviewer, but you be the judge. You can find the review on our website as well, badlandsmedia.tv/cityzoo. And I actually wanted to read a quick part of this because it's so funny, this book, guys. Let me get to the spot I'm at. Oh, where did I put my bookmark? There we go. I just want to read this real quick paragraph. Normie originally thought that he might go vote this time, but now he was not so sure. Not with all of these new rules and guidelines in place. It was hassle enough for him to keep his little blinders attached while he climbed up and down his trees. The plaza might be too many leaves to bite off, he thought. Perhaps it would be better to play it safe and skip the vote. He resolved to sleep on it. Normie is the name of a character in the book, guys. Get this thing. It's so funny. It's awesome. It's relevant. It's topical. It's perfect. It's a great book. Thank you, Jeff and City Zoo, for sponsoring the show. All right, guys. Let's get right into it. The Devolution series, part 11, as read by Patrick Gunnels. And we're going to speed them up to 1.25. It's about an hour and a half today. I'm going to skip a couple things, but hopefully not too much. This is a lot of the background on Spygate, CrowdStrike's involvement with the DNC. This was shortly after the Durham speaking indictment came out, and everybody was trying to guess like who the characters were and all these things that were involved. And I did guess who I thought it would be in this, but I was wrong. So I know it's surprising, but I am wrong more than probably I'm right. But yeah, this is a great article. At the end of it, I speculate a little bit about Cybercom and what the SolarWinds hack really was. It's just a fascinating article. A lot of great context on CrowdStrike, who comes up again later in the series because of how involved they are in our elections. It's just crazy. Let's get going.
In Devolution Part 10, I outlined the larger battle between President Trump and the political establishment, including the foundation for the battle that we saw building during the Obama administration. In this article, I'll be focusing more on the battle that occurred during Trump's presidency, including how the political establishment was even more pervasive in their election theft than we originally suspected. Spygate. I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds here with Spygate because this isn't my area of expertise. I encourage you to follow Brian Cates and his work, as he is the authority on all things Spygate. I do want to mention.
I will say this was kind of before I got to know Just Human well, and Kyle was also somebody you could follow. I'll give you my permission to follow Kyle as well with a lot of the Spygate stuff.
This because there has been some recent developments regarding Michael Sussman, and it provides some context for what I will be discussing throughout this article. On October 3rd, 2018, John Solomon published an article in The Hill discussing the origins of the Trump-Russia collusion hoax. From the article, quote, "Congressional investigators have confirmed that a top FBI official met with Democratic Party lawyers to talk about allegations of Donald Trump/Russia collusion weeks before the 2016 election and before the Bureau secured a search warrant targeting Trump's campaign. Former FBI General Counsel James Baker met during the 2016 season with at least one attorney from Perkins Coie, the Democratic National Committee's private law firm. That's the firm used by the DNC and Hillary Clinton's campaign to secretly pay research firm Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele, a former British intelligence operative, to compile a dossier of uncorroborated raw intelligence alleging Trump and Moscow were colluding to hijack the presidential election. The dossier, though mostly unverified, was then used by the FBI as the main evidence seeking a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, warrant targeting the Trump campaign in the final days of the campaign. The revelation was confirmed both in contemporaneous evidence and testimony secured by a joint investigation by Republicans on the House Judiciary and Government Oversight Committees, my source tells me. It means the FBI had good reason to suspect the dossier was connected to the DNC's main law firm and was the product of a Democratic opposition research effort to defeat Trump, yet failed to disclose that information to the FISA court in October 2016 when the Bureau applied for a FISA warrant to surveil Trump campaign advisor Carter Page. Quote, "This is a bombshell that unequivocally shows the real collusion was between the FBI and Donald Trump's opposition, the DNC, Hillary, and a Trump-hating British intel officer to hijack the election rather than some conspiracy between Putin and Trump," a knowledgeable source told me.
Sounds like something Kash Patel would say, or Devin Nunes. I wonder if that's who the source is. But yeah, this is like some great context on the Spygate situation, what really happened. And we'll kind of get into, I'll wait to say this till we get a little further on.
Baker was interviewed by lawmakers behind closed doors on Wednesday. Sources declined to divulge much about his testimony, other than to say it confirmed other evidence about the contact between the Perkins Coie law firm and the FBI. The sources said Baker identified lawyer Michael Sussman, a former DOJ lawyer, as the Perkins Coie attorney who reached out to him and said the firm gave him documents and a thumb drive related to Russian interference in the election, hacking, and possible Trump connections. Information gathered separately by another congressional committee indicate the contact occurred in September, the month before the FISA warrant was approved. These revelations illustrate anew how much the FBI and Justice Department have withheld from the public about their collaboration and collusion with clearly partisan elements of the Clinton campaign and the DNC, Fusion GPS, and Christopher Steele that were trying to defeat Trump.
It's so funny when I see this stuff, based on what we had last week or 2 weeks ago with the whole Russian interference story and Tenet Media, Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, all those guys. Like that pales in comparison to this right here, this story of election interference. And you can go into like what the media has done too. Way worse. But what the media runs with, what the Democrats run with, what the partisan DOJ runs with is, Russian invested in a media company and they couldn't even get them to spin the narrative they wanted. It's just crazy.
The growing body of evidence that the FBI used mostly politically motivated, unverified intelligence from an opponent to justify spying on the GOP nominee's campaign just weeks before Election Day has prompted a growing number of Republicans to ask President Trump to declassify the rest of the FBI's main documents in the Russia collusion case.
If you guys remember, that is something he did do before leaving office, declassified all the Crossfire Hurricane stuff. But there's that whole fiasco about the binder. Supposedly he had it, and then Meadows returned it for some further declassification, and the people at the Biden DOJ didn't end up releasing it. And then that story from CNN came out. Gosh, that was a while ago, 6 months, a year ago. Yeah, I think I was still at my parents' house then. So that'd have been a year ago. And they were saying how, nobody can find this binder. And Trump was the last one to have it, so it must have been Trump's fault. But people have speculated, is that why they went to do the Mar-a-Lago raid in the first place? I mean, there's so many little tentacles that connect to this Spygate stuff and these documents, and it's fascinating.
End quote. On September 15th, 2021, the New York Times reported that John Durham will ask a grand jury to indict Michael Sussman on a charge of making false statements to the FBI. Technofog provided a great analysis regarding the unfolding situation. From Technofog, quote, breaking report from the New York Times, Savage and Goldman et al. Special counsel John Durham will ask a grand jury to indict former DNC/Clinton campaign lawyer and Perkins Coie partner Michael Sussman for giving false statements. The false statement charges would relate to a September 19th, 2016 meeting FBI lawyer James Baker had with Sussman, where Sussman relayed to the FBI the discredited theory that the Trump organization was communicating with Alpha Bank. The New York Times states, quote, Mr. Baker, the former FBI lawyer, is said to have told investigators that he recalled Mr. Sussman saying that he was not meeting him on behalf of any client. End quote. This was contradicted by 1, Sussman's testimony to Congress, and 2, Sussman's own billing records. Sussman's lawyers acknowledged they expected him to be indicted. More recently, we noted that Fusion GPS has been fighting to keep secret its communications about Trump/Alpha Bank secret in a civil court. Court records we reviewed appear to show the degree with which Fusion GPS, Glenn Simpson, and their associates went in drafting and promoting the false Alpha Bank/Trump organization story. One court document of interest is this August 26, 2016 email from Fusion GPS to Michael Sussman. That Fusion GPS-Sussman correspondence occurred not long before Sussman met with FBI General Counsel James Baker weeks later. Quote, Sussman also appears to have provided information to Baker that was separate from hacks of the DNC's computer systems. Quote, in September 2016, redacted, shared similar information in a one-on-one meeting with FBI General Counsel James Baker, reads a footnote in a report on Russian meddling released by the House Intelligence Committee's report on April 27th. The emails correspond to the dates the Alpha Bank/Trump organization was getting media exposure. One has to wonder what other correspondence Sussman had with Fusion GPS, end quote. Back to Patel. So, just to make sure we're clear on what is happening here, Spygate was already underway on the bogus Steele dossier, and Crossfire Hurricane was already started. Michael Sussman, a former DOJ lawyer, current partner at the Perkins Coie law firm and lawyer for the DNC, was attempting to launch a second parallel investigation of Trump based on the bogus Alpha Bank story. Here is a screenshot from his indictment, which was released on September 16th, 2021. That's yesterday from the time of this recording. From the indictment, 4.
Which is crazy because I had already started working on the CrowdStrike article when this stuff all broke. So the timing of this was nuts.
During the meeting, Sussman lied about the capacity in which he was providing the allegations to the FBI. Specifically, Sussman stated falsely that he was not doing his work on the aforementioned allegations for any client, which led the FBI General Counsel to understand that Sussman was acting as a good citizen, merely passing along information, not as a paid advocate or political operative. In fact, and as alleged in further detail below, this statement was intentionally false and misleading because in assembling and conveying these allegations, Sussman acted on behalf of specific clients, namely 1, a U.S. technology industry executive, Tech Executive 1, and a U.S. Internet Company 1, and 2, the Hillary Clinton presidential campaign, hereinafter the Clinton campaign. Back to Patel. We don't know for sure who tech executive 1 is or which company, internet company 1 is, but I would be willing to bet a very small amount of money that it's Sean Henry and CrowdStrike.
I would have lost that very small amount of money. That's how unconfident I was, but I do know that Sean Henry and CrowdStrike are like essentially criminals, like based on all this stuff that's played out since then. So it wasn't the worst guess, but it probably wasn't the best guess either. I probably should have left the guessing to the people that really followed the Spygate saga, because I just like came in, I was writing a CrowdStrike article, this indictment came out. It's like, holy shit, this is perfect. Maybe these guys are Sean Henry and CrowdStrike. Let's write about it. But I mean, it's still all relevant. Otherwise, other than I was wrong about this, but everything like that I touch on with their context, their history, and what they did in the election, which is, we talk in more detail in the future article. It's still, that stuff's on point. But yeah, I was wrong about this guess.
I'll be covering both Sean Henry and CrowdStrike. Sean Henry is the founder of CrowdStrike as we go on. But to further establish the connection, here are contracts directly linking Perkins Coie, CrowdStrike, and the DNC. Perkins Coie LLP.
I wish you wouldn't have like skipped past that, because that is a very important part of this here. Just to point out again, let me share my other screen, and I'll try to remember to go back to the other side. These are statements of work between CrowdStrike and the DNC, and CrowdStrike and the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. So they were literally hired by those two to do some work. Okay. That is very important.
Hired CrowdStrike for services needed by the DNC and the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Sussman and his law firm, Perkins Coie, were essentially acting as the middlemen. More from the indictment of Michael Sussman. Quote.
And remember what they were doing here. And maybe I get into this, I don't remember specifically, but what we got from Durham and the Durham report is the reason they used these law firms, or Perkins Coie, to be the middleman is for the attorney-client privilege. And that's how they tried to keep all their stuff under wraps and keep it a crime. They would go talk to their lawyer. They would have the lawyer do the bad thing, and so it could never come back around to them. But Durham was able to kind of break through that shield of attorney-client privilege. So I don't think we've seen the end of the Durham report and some of the tentacles he was digging into.
Tech Executive 1 uses his access at multiple internet companies to conduct opposition research and create a narrative regarding Trump. 21. As alleged in further detail below, in or around the same time period and in...
But sorry, that's very interesting to me, that phrasing, because of what Hillary Clinton said yesterday. Very similar. Let me share this quick.
Boosting Trump back in 2016. But I also think there are Americans who are engaged in this kind of propaganda. And whether they should be civilly or even in some cases criminally charged is something that would be a better.
Okay, well, that's the wrong clip. Hold on. Here we go.
Understand why it's so difficult for the press to have a consistent narrative about how dangerous Trump is. The late
Similar language. It's all about the narrative, right? Narrative warfare. You heard it at the Devolution series first. I do think about that. I try to think back to when I was first writing the series, especially when I get to part like 22 and 23. So 22 is a regular warfare, right? That was May 27th of 2022. Was the public talking about psyops and narrative warfare and irregular warfare as much as they are now? Like, were they talking about that before then? I don't think they were. I'm not trying to like take credit for it, but I honestly think that the Devolution series and you guys and our community has really helped seed that out there, because I hear it all the time now. Narratives and psyops and all those terms. Like, I feel like that's something that wasn't that well discussed or often used until we started kind of getting it out there. And now it's everywhere and you can't unsee it. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe it's gotten to my head. I don't know. But that's just how it feels sometimes.
furtherance of his efforts with Sussman and campaign lawyer 1 to disseminate allegations regarding Trump. Tech Executive 1 used his access at multiple organizations to gather and mine public and non-public internet data regarding Trump and his associates, with the goal of creating a narrative regarding the candidate's ties to Russia. End quote. At this point, everybody in the deep state has gone all in on creating the narrative that Trump is a Russian asset, and they are trying to throw as much crap out there to see what sticks. They were fabricating evidence of Russian collusion. Let's look at one more thing from that Technofog article. Quote, questions have long been asked about Sussman's involvement in the potential cover-up of the DNC hack in 2016. It was Sussman who brought in Crowdstrike, given his close relationship with founder Sean Henry, to look into the DNC hack. According to Politico, quote within a quote, in late April 2016, the DNC's IT department noticed some suspicious behavior and contacted DNC Chief Executive Officer Amy Dacey, according to a DNC official. Dacey reached out to DNC lawyer Michael Sussman, a partner at the Perkins Coie law firm and a former federal prosecutor specializing in cybercrimes. Sussman called Sean Henry, the president of cybersecurity firm Crowdstrike, to get his company's help, end quote. This Crowdstrike Perkins Coie link puts into perspective this information in the New York Times article, where Durham, quote, has been pursuing a theory that the Clinton campaign used Perkins Coie to submit dubious information to the FBI about Russia and Mr. Trump in an effort to gin up investigative activity to hurt his 2016 campaign. If that is the case, then we doubt it would be limited to the Alpha Bank allegations, end quote. Back to Patel. Remember, the Clinton campaign used Perkins Coie to submit dubious information to the FBI about Russia and Mr. Trump. Let's look at the DNC hack more closely. The DNC hack. The supposed hack of the Democratic National.
So this is a long part. I was debating whether or not we should just skip through it, but it's such good background into all of this. So I think we're gonna let it roll.
National Convention servers was yet another story used to further the narrative that Russia was actively interfering to get Donald Trump elected president in 2016.
Another reason is because I think this is the part that goes through one of the things that me and Kyle disagree on when it comes to the DNC hack and CrowdStrike, because I personally believe there was no hack and it was just CrowdStrike who said there was and faked it and all these things, accused Russia just to get that narrative out there. I mean, they're clearly just trying to build that narrative, right? Where Kyle's a believer in much more of the actuals, but not that's right. I mean, it's hard to prove one way or the other at this point in time. I think eventually we'll figure out who's more accurate with their interpretation. But yeah, so this is relevant and interesting.
This July 5th, 2019 article from Real Clear Investigations is long, but well worth the read due to the context it provides. Here are the most important screenshots. Quote, at a May press conference capping his tenure as special counsel, Robert Mueller emphasized what he called the central allegation of the 2-year Russia probe. The Russian government, Mueller sternly declared, engaged in multiple systematic efforts to interfere in our election, and that allegation deserves the attention of every American. Mueller's comments echoed a January 2017 intelligence community assessment hereinafter ICA, asserting with, quote, high confidence that Russia conducted a sweeping 2016 election influence campaign. I don't think we've ever encountered a more aggressive or direct campaign to interfere in our election process, then Director of National Intelligence James Clapper told a Senate hearing. While the 448-page Mueller report found no conspiracy between Donald Trump's campaign and Russia, it offered voluminous details to support the sweeping conclusion that the Kremlin worked to secure Trump's victory. The report claims that the interference operation occurred principally on 2 fronts. Russian military intelligence officers hacked and leaked embarrassing Democratic Party documents, and a government-linked troll farm orchestrated a sophisticated and far-reaching social media campaign that denigrated Hillary Clinton and promoted Trump. But a close examination of the report shows that none of those headline assertions are supported by the report's evidence or other publicly available sources. They are further undercut by investigative shortcomings and the conflicts of interest of key players involved. 1, the report uses qualified and vague language to describe key events, indicating that Mueller and his investigators do not actually know for certain whether Russian intelligence officers stole Democratic Party emails or how those emails were transferred to WikiLeaks. 2, the report's timeline of events appears to defy logic. According to its narrative, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange announced the publication of Democratic Party emails not only before he received the documents, but before he even communicated with the source that provided them. 3. There is strong reason to doubt Mueller's suggestion that an alleged Russian cutout called Guccifer 2.0 supplied the stolen emails to Assange. 4. Mueller's decision not to interview Assange, a central figure who claims Russia was not behind the hack, suggests an unwillingness to explore avenues of evidence on fundamental questions. 5. U.S. intelligence officials
This is the big one.
cannot make definitive conclusions about the hacking of the Democratic National Committee computer servers because they did not analyze those servers themselves. Instead, they relied on the forensics of Crowdstrike, a private contractor for the DNC that was not a neutral party. Much as Russian dossier compiler Christopher Steele, also a DNC contractor, was not a neutral party. This puts two Democrat-hired contractors squarely behind underlying allegations in the affair, a key circumstance that Mueller ignores. 6. Further, the government allowed Crowdstrike and the Democratic Party's legal counsel to submit redacted records, meaning Crowdstrike and not the government decided what could be revealed or not regarding evidence of hacking. The Mueller report's narrative of Russian hacking and leaking was initially laid out in a July 2018 indictment of 12 Russian intelligence officers and is detailed further in the report. According to Mueller, operatives at Russia's main intelligence agency, the GRU, broke into Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta's emails in March 2016. The hackers infiltrated Podesta's account with a common tactic called spear phishing, duping him with a phony security alert that led him to enter his password.
That's how they got. That's supposedly how Iran got into Trump's emails. Man, the parallels here are interesting. But going back to the hack that hold on, let me scroll up on this part and cover that one more time. This part right here. The DNC did not analyze the servers themselves. They relied on forensics of Crowdstrike, a private contractor for the DNC that was not a neutral party. Remember Sean Henry and his ties to the FBI, and then the FBI never reviewed them either. I'm still to this day pretty confident of that. I should have looked it up before going live here, but I'm almost positive that the FBI also relied on Crowdstrike and like the printout. They didn't actually get the servers themselves. I think that was in the Durham report, maybe the Mueller report. I don't remember which report. Some one of the reports. And so the Crowdstrike was the one who had full authority to determine what happened with the DNC and these hacks. But yeah, it's interesting that we have a parallel here of the spear phishing thing with those emails and now what happened with Trump.
The GRU then used stolen Democratic Party credentials to hack into the DNC and Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, DCCC, servers beginning in April 2016. Beginning in June 2016, the report claims the GRU created two online personas, DC Leaks and Guccifer 2.0, to begin releasing the stolen material. After making contact later that month, Guccifer 2.0 apparently transferred the DNC emails to the whistleblowing anti-secrecy publisher WikiLeaks, which released the first batch on July 22nd, ahead of the Democratic National Convention. The report presents this narrative with remarkable specificity. It describes in detail how GRU officers installed malware, leased US-based computers, and used cryptocurrencies to carry out their hacking operation. The intelligence that caught the GRU hackers is portrayed as so invasive and precise that it even captured the keystrokes of individual Russian officers, including their use of search engines. In fact, the report contains crucial gaps in the evidence that might support the authoritative account. Here is how it describes the core crime under investigation, the alleged GRU theft of DNC emails. Quote, between approximately May 25th, 2016 and June 1st, 2016, GRU officers accessed the DNC's mail server from a GRU-controlled computer leased inside the United States. During these connections, Unit 26165 officers appear to have stolen thousands of emails and attachments, which were later released by WikiLeaks in July 2016. The GRU also stole documents.
It's interesting that they're using the word approximately. I just noticed that now. Maybe it's not interesting. I'm not a tech guy. I've never examined a computer for email theft, but I feel like you would have exact timestamps of all the activity if you catch somebody doing something bad, like on a computer, it's on the record. So using the word approximately is interesting. I don't know why. Maybe it's not, but to me it is.
Documents from the DNC network shortly after gaining access. On April 22nd, 2016, the GRU copied files from the DNC network to GRU-controlled computers. Stolen documents included the DNC's opposition research into candidate Trump. Between approximately May 25th, 2016 and June 1st, 2016, GRU officers accessed the DNC's mail server from a GRU-controlled computer leased inside the United States. During these connections, Unit 26165 officers appear to have stolen thousands of emails and attachments, which were later released by WikiLeaks in July 2016. The report's use of that one word, appear, undercuts its suggestions that Mueller possesses convincing evidence that GRU officers stole, quote, thousands of emails and attachments from DNC servers. It is a departure from the language used in his July 2018 indictment, which contained no such qualifier. 29. Between, on, or about May 20.
Yeah, so I see the chat here. You guys are talking about, okay, Seth Rich is the one who actually downloaded this and sold it off, or whoever gave it to somebody else to release. That is probably likely what actually happened. It's hard to prove, but that's probably what happened. And then instead of that, they wanted to use this denigrating information that got released on, like, against the Clinton campaign. They wanted to twist it into some sort of like imagine if the Russia hack story never came out. What if the actual story was reported that Seth Rich stole this stuff because he saw the bad stuff that was going on between Clinton and all this corruption, and he wanted to put it out there, and that was the story, and then they killed him for it. If that was the only story, I think that would have been a much bigger deal, but they wanted to make an opportunity to use this against Trump. And so they brought in a friendly IT team to say, well, okay, let's not say that Seth Rich downloaded it and stole it. Let's say that Russia hacked it, and therefore Trump is working with Russia to try to win the election, and Trump is a Putin puppet and all these things. A narrative they were kind of already building and seeding and already working on another front with the Spygate stuff. So it was kind of like perfect for them. I mean, it was a perfect opportunity for them to add to their story by taking something bad and spinning it into a positive for their side, if that makes sense.
25th, 2016 and June 1st, 2016.
If that doesn't make sense, let me know. Sometimes when I'm talking, I can't tell if like I'm making sense. I don't make sense to myself sometimes when I'm talking. And so I have no idea if it makes sense to you. It probably doesn't, if I can't even make sense to myself. So let me know.
Conspirators hacked the DNC Microsoft Exchange server and stole thousands of emails from the work accounts of DNC employees. During that time, Yermakov researched PowerShell commands related to accessing and managing the Microsoft Exchange server. This is from the Nitikshow/GRU indictment, July 2018, page 11. Quote from former FBI Special Agent Colleen Rowley. It's certainly curious as to why this discrepancy exists between the language of Mueller's indictment and the extra wiggle room inserted into his report a year later. It may be an example of this and other existing gaps that are inherent with the use of circumstantial information. With Mueller's exercise of quite unprecedented, but politically expedient, extraterritorial jurisdiction to indict foreign intelligence operatives who were never expected to contest his conclusory assertions in court, he didn't have to worry about precision. I would guess, however, that even though NSA may be able to track some hacking operations, it would be inherently difficult, if not impossible, to connect specific individuals to the computer transfer operations in question, end quote. A questionable timeline. Mueller's uncertainty over the theft and transfer of Democratic Party emails isn't the only gap in his case. Another is his timeline of events, a critical component of any criminal investigation. The report's timeline defies logic. According to its account, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange announced the publication of the emails not only before he received the documents, but before he even communicated with the source who provided them. As the Mueller report confirms, on June 12th, 2016, Assange told an interviewer, quote, "We have upcoming leaks in relation to Hillary Clinton, which is great," end quote. But Mueller reports that WikiLeaks' first contact with Guccifer 2.0 and DC Leaks comes 2 days after that announcement. From the report, B.
So think about this. If the story, if the actual is here that Seth Rich did download these documents and communicated with Assange, directly with Assange, and that's how they got the WikiLeaks documents, the Clinton emails to the WikiLeaks. If those are the only two loose ends that you have in how this actually came out, and you want to make sure that that story never sees the light of day, you bring in CrowdStrike to draw up this fake narrative about Russia hacking, and then you have to get rid of those two loose ends. One of them, Seth Rich, we know what happened there. He was a DNC staffer, guys, so he didn't have money, he didn't have power, he didn't have friends in high places that could protect him, and maybe he didn't realize that they were even going to kill him. But that's how they got rid of him. And then look what happened to Julian Assange. Gets basically put in prison for 7 years, 8 years, whatever it's been. He's out now, so maybe we will get the truth about this. Like, wouldn't it be great to at some point see released communication between Assange and Seth Rich about how those emails actually come out, and then what that would do to all these other narratives that they've spun up? Like, if that truth came out, if he could show how Seth Rich got him the emails, it would completely destroy the CrowdStrike and their credibility about the whole Russia and all these hacking stuff, and that destroys all these other narratives out there about Russian hacking. And that'd be a perfect way to do it. So I hope that's what happens at some point. Maybe that could be an October surprise. It would be a WikiLeaks October surprise part 2.
WikiLeaks' first contact with Guccifer 2.0 and DC Leaks. Shortly after the GRU's first release of stolen documents through DCLeaks.com in June 2016, GRU officers also used the DC Leaks persona to contact WikiLeaks about possible coordination in the future release of stolen emails. On June 14th, 2016, DC Leaks sent a direct message to WikiLeaks noting, quote, "You announced your organization was preparing to publish more Hillary emails. We are ready to support you. We have some sensitive information too, in particular her financial documents. Let's do it together. What do you think about publishing our info at the same moment? Thank you." Around the same time, WikiLeaks initiated communications with the GRU persona Guccifer 2.0 shortly after it was used to release documents stolen from the DNC. On June 22nd, 2016, 7 days after Guccifer 2.0's first releases of stolen DNC documents, WikiLeaks used Twitter's direct message function to contact the Guccifer 2.0 Twitter account and suggest that Guccifer 2.0, quote, "send any new material stolen from the DNC here for us to review, and it will have much higher impact than what you are doing," end quote. On July 6th, 2016, WikiLeaks again contacted Guccifer 2.0 through Twitter's private messaging function, writing, quote, "If you have anything Hillary related, we want it in the next 2 days, preferable, because the DNC is approaching and she will solidify Bernie supporters behind her after."
What's interesting about this too is like these Twitter messages. How do we know those weren't fabricated? Because we know Twitter, and they're basically a deep state tool. And James Baker was there. They easily could have, well, maybe not easily. I guess again, I'm not a technical expert. I don't know how easy it is to do some of this stuff, but it seems like it'd be very easy for them to fake communication between WikiLeaks or anybody and some Russian, group out there, especially if you use that as a reason and you're colluding with the FBI and the intelligence community to make sure that Assange, gets taken down and can't get the truth out there. If they're all working in coordination, I feel like you could fabricate that stuff fairly easily, these communications. So hard to trust them.
The Guccifer 2.0 persona responded, "Okay, I see." WikiLeaks also explained, quote, "We think Trump only has a 25% chance of winning against Hillary, so conflict between Bernie and Hillary is interesting." From the Mueller report, page 45. Back to Patel. If Assange's first contact with DC Leaks came on June 14th and with Guccifer 2.0 on June 22nd, then what was Assange talking about on June 12th? It is possible that Assange heard from another supposed Russian source before that, but if so, Mueller doesn't know about it. Instead, the report offers the implausible scenario that their first contact came after Assange's announcement. There is another issue with the report's Guccifer 2.0/WikiLeaks timeline. Assange would have been announcing the pending release of stolen emails, not just before he heard from the source, but also before he received the stolen emails. As noted earlier, Mueller suggested that WikiLeaks received the stolen material from Guccifer 2.0 on or around July 14th, a full month after Assange publicly announced that he had them. In yet one more significant inconsistency, Mueller asserts that the two Russian outfits running the Kremlin-backed operation, Guccifer 2.0 and DC Leaks, communicated about their covert activities over Twitter. Mueller reports that on September 15th, 2016, quote, "The Twitter account Guccifer_2 sent DC Leaks a direct message, which is the first known contact between the personas. During subsequent communications, the Guccifer 2.0 persona informed DC Leaks that WikiLeaks was trying to contact DC Leaks and arrange for a way to speak through encrypted emails." Why would Russian intelligence cutouts running a sophisticated interference campaign communicate over an easily monitored social media platform? In one of many such instances throughout the report, Mueller shows no curiosity in pursuing this obvious question.
Well, the reason he didn't show any curiosity is because it wasn't a real lead anyway. It was made up. The message, again, this is me speculating here. I don't know this for sure. And nobody's dug down that rabbit hole before. And I haven't heard anybody talking about that either, but it seems so obvious to me that they could just fake those Twitter messages, especially after all we know about Twitter now. It seems very plausible.
For his part, Assange has repeatedly claimed that Russia was not his source and that the US government does not know who was. Quote, the US intelligence community is not aware of when WikiLeaks obtained its material or when the sequencing of our material was done or how we obtained our material directly, Assange said in January 2015. He continues, WikiLeaks sources in relation to the Podesta emails and the DNC leak are not members of any government. They are not state parties. They do not come from the Russian government, end quote. Keep that last paragraph in mind. As I will touch on this again soon, Assange has claimed over and over that Russia was not his source.
Very important, guys. Very important.
No server inspection. Reliance on CrowdStrike. Before he nixed US government contacts with Assange, Comey was implicated in another key investigative lapse, the FBI's failure to conduct its own investigation of the DNC servers, which housed the record of alleged intrusions and malware used to steal information. As Comey told Congress in March 2017, the FBI never got direct access to the machines themselves. Instead, explained, the Bureau relied on Crowdstrike, a cybersecurity firm hired by the DNC, which, quote, shared with us their forensics from their review of the system. While acknowledging...
You guys catch that there? The FBI never got direct access to the machines themselves.
That the FBI would always prefer to have access hands-on ourselves, if that's possible, Comey emphasized his confidence in the information provided by CrowdStrike, which he called a highly respected private company and a high-class entity. CrowdStrike's accuracy is far from a given. Days after Comey's testimony, CrowdStrike was forced to retract its claim that Russian software was used to hack Ukrainian military hardware. CrowdStrike's error is especially relevant because it had accused the GRU of using that same software in hacking the DNC. There is also reason to question CrowdStrike's impartiality. Its co-founder, Dmitry Alperovich, is a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, the preeminent Washington think tank that aggressively promotes a hawkish posture towards Russia. CrowdStrike executive Sean Henry, who led the forensics team that ultimately blamed Russia for the DNC breach, previously served as assistant director at the FBI under Mueller. A few critically important pieces of information from the above screenshot. First, there are some interesting...
I mean, I knew this, but I always forget how important this point is. That Sean Henry, basically the face and the ass of CrowdStrike, the guy who led the forensic team that blamed Russia on the DNC breach, worked as an assistant director underneath Mueller. That's just gross.
Sean Henry, with a close relationship to DNC lawyer and Perkins Coie partner Michael Sussman, also formerly worked under Mueller. That means the same individual who, quote, led the forensics team that ultimately blamed Russia for the DNC breach, previously worked under the individual in charge of the entire special counsel looking into Trump's ties to Russia. The whole situation is one big case study on conflict of interest. Second, it mentions the retraction CrowdStrike was forced to make regarding Ukraine. This article from The Atlantic outlines how in December of 2016, CrowdStrike released a report that claimed the same Russian GRU that hacked the DNC also hacked into a Ukrainian artillery app, resulting in heavy losses for Ukraine in their war against Russian-backed separatists. The issue here is that Ukraine's Ministry of Defense claimed the combat losses and hacking never happened. From the article, quote, an influential British think tank and Ukraine's military are disputing a report that the US cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike has used to buttress its claims of Russian hacking in the presidential election. The CrowdStrike report, released in December, asserted that Russians hacked into the Ukrainian artillery app, resulting in heavy losses of howitzers in Ukraine's war with Russian-backed separatists. But the International Institute for Strategic Studies, IISS, told VOA that CrowdStrike erroneously used IISS data as proof of the intrusion. IISS disavowed any connection to the CrowdStrike report. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense also has claimed combat losses and hacking never happened. A CrowdStrike spokesperson told VOA that it stands by its findings, which they say, quote, have been confirmed by others in the cybersecurity community, end quote. The challenges to CrowdStrike's credibility are significant because the firm was the first to link last year's hacks of Democratic Party computers to Russian actors, and because CrowdStrike co-founder Dmitry Alperovich has trumpeted its Ukraine report as more evidence of Russian election tampering. Alperovich has said that variants of the same software were used in both hacks, end quote. Back to Patel.
That is a weird story because of the Ukraine-Russia situation we're in right now. I mean, what a weird story. So CrowdStrike will release a report saying Russia hacked into an artillery app, resulting in heavy losses in Ukraine's war with Russian-backed separatists. But Ukraine's Ministry of Defense said the losses and the hacking never happened. Like, I'm just trying to put this in the perspective of the current war we're in right now. Like, what the hell is going on here? Because Ukraine, in my opinion, Ukraine's like deep state, but I guess evil, good to an evil. I'm gonna have to talk this out with. Maybe we'll talk about this on Saturday with Chris and Patrick, because this is something I think those two would enjoy. Well, maybe Wednesday even. I don't know, but yeah, interesting story.
CrowdStrike was forced to revise and retract their claims after Ukraine denied it ever happened. CrowdStrike fabricated evidence to create a narrative. Are you seeing a pattern yet? Remember, CrowdStrike didn't allow anybody else to access and review the DNC servers, so we're forced to rely on only their accounting of what happened. Now, this is where things get even more interesting. On July 25th, 2019, President Trump had his infamous call with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, the call that led to his first impeachment trial. One of the most overlooked aspects of the call, by the media at least, was President Trump's mention of CrowdStrike specifically. The media was far too concerned with doing damage control on Biden's image. Here's a link to the transcript. The president says, "I would like you to do us a favor, though, because our country's been through a lot and Ukraine knows a lot about it. I would like you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine. They say CrowdStrike. I guess you have one of your wealthy people, the server. They say Ukraine has it. There are a lot of other things that went on, the whole situation. I think you're surrounding yourself with some of the same people. I would like to have the Attorney General call you or your people, and I'd like you to get to the bottom of it. As you saw yesterday, that whole nonsense ended with a very poor performance by a man named Robert Mueller, an incompetent performance, but they say a lot of it started with Ukraine. Whatever you can do, it's very important that you do it if that's possible," end quote. Trump.
Man, the things that call with Zelensky kicked off. I mean, from impeachment, which ended up being COVID, and then stealing an election, and then the war. I mean, that is just insane.
Did bring up Hunter Biden and Burisma during this phone call, and that is not insignificant because their corruption.
Okay, I've been trying to figure out where that music's coming from, and I keep like looking around here thinking it's me, but it's Patrick when he read this 3 years ago or whatever.
Plays a major role when you look at the bigger picture, but he also directly mentioned CrowdStrike, the company involved in, quote, uncovering the DNC hack, which helped perpetrate the entire narrative that Trump colluded with Russia. The same company, which I believe was responsible for fabricating evidence for the Alpha Bank story. Was Trump's impeachment started because he was asking about the Biden family corruption, or because he was asking Ukraine to look into CrowdStrike? You'll see why I'm asking this question shortly. On May 13th, 2020, Real Clear Investigations published another article discussing CrowdStrike and the DNC hack with new bombshell revelations. Quote from Real Clear Investigations: CrowdStrike, the private cybersecurity firm that first accused Russia of hacking Democratic Party emails and served as a critical source for U.S. intelligence officials in the years-long Trump-Russia probe, acknowledged to Congress more than 2 years ago that it had no concrete evidence that Russian hackers stole emails from the Democratic National Committee's server. CrowdStrike President Sean Henry's admission, under oath, in a recently declassified December 2017 interview before the House Intelligence Committee, raises new questions about whether Special Counsel Robert Mueller, intelligence officials, and Democrats misled the public. The allegation that Russia stole Democratic Party emails from Hillary Clinton, John Podesta, and others, and then passed them to WikiLeaks, helped trigger the FBI's probe into now debunked claims of a conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia to steal the 2016 election. The CrowdStrike admissions were released just 2 months after the Justice Department retreated from its other central claim that Russia meddled in the 2016 election when it dropped charges against Russian troll farms it said had been trying to get Trump elected. Henry personally led the remediation and forensics analysis of the DNC server after being warned of a breach in late April 2016. His work was paid for by the DNC, which refused to turn over its server to the FBI. Asked for the date when alleged Russian hackers stole data from the DNC server, Henry testified that CrowdStrike did not, in fact, know if such a theft occurred at all. Quote, "We did not have concrete evidence that the data was exfiltrated, moved electronically, from the DNC, but we have indicators that it was exfiltrated," end quote. Henry's 2017 testimony that there was no concrete evidence that the emails were stolen electronically suggests that Mueller may have been misleading in his 2019 final report. The report stated that Russian intelligence, quote, "appears to have compressed and exfiltrated over 70 gigabytes of data, and agents, quote, appear to have stolen thousands of emails and attachments," end quote, from Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and DNC servers, respectively. It also suggests that the DNC emails were transferred to a server in Illinois controlled by Russian intelligence service GRU. But in addition to including the qualifier appear, Mueller's source for the Illinois server claim is redacted. That leaves CrowdStrike to date as U.S. intelligence officials' primary publicly known source for its confident claims about Russian hacking. The stolen emails, which were published by WikiLeaks, whose founder, Julian Assange, has long denied they came from Russia, were embarrassing to the party because, among other things, they showed the DNC had favored Clinton during her 2016 primary battles against Senator Bernie Sanders for the presidential nomination. The DNC eventually issued an apology to Sanders and his supporters for the, quote, "inexcusable remarks made over email." The DNC hack was separate from the FBI's investigation of Clinton's use of a private server while serving as President Obama's Secretary of State. The disclosure that CrowdStrike found no evidence that alleged Russian hackers exfiltrated any data from the DNC server raises a critical question. On what basis, then, did it accuse them of stealing the emails? Further, on what basis did Obama administration officials make far more forceful claims about Russian hacking? Back to Patel.
That's an interesting point. I mean, I kind of always forget that those two things are separate instances. You know what I mean? You had the stolen emails, and then you had the DNC hack. They're separate, two different things. Yeah, there's something here. I just feel like there's something here that I'm missing. So I'm just like, I'm thinking here, my wheels are spinning. I've messaged Brittany Breaks. I think I have something we need to talk about tomorrow now. There's something going on here that, I don't know. We'll see.
The entire time, CrowdStrike never actually had direct evidence that the emails were stolen. And the fact that they never allowed anybody from the FBI or NSA to look at the servers is stunning. Back to the article, quote, "If CrowdStrike's role in the investigation raises a red flag, the potential exclusion of another entity raises an equally glaring one. According to former NSA technical director Bill Binney, the NSA is the only U.S. agency that could conclusively determine the source of the alleged DNC email hacks. Quote, if this was really an internet hack, the NSA could easily tell us when the information was taken and the route it took after being removed from the DNC server," Binney says. But given Mueller's qualified language and his repeated use of "in or around," rather than outlining specific down to the second timestamps, which the NSA could provide, Binney is skeptical that NSA intelligence was included in the GRU indictment and the report, end quote. CrowdStrike's role in this investigation and the long leash afforded to them by the FBI raised glaring concerns, to put it in the most mild terms possible. Who was actually calling the shots in this quote-unquote investigation, and why wasn't it the FBI? More from Real Clear Investigations. Quote, "Redacted CrowdStrike reports." While the extent of the FBI's reliance on CrowdStrike remains unclear, critical details are beginning to emerge via an unlikely source. The legal case of Roger Stone, the Trump advisor Mueller indicted for, among other things, allegedly lying to Congress about his failed efforts to learn about WikiLeaks' plans regarding Clinton's emails. Lawyers for Stone discovered that CrowdStrike submitted 3 forensic reports to the FBI that were redacted and in draft form. When Stone asked to see CrowdStrike's unredacted versions, prosecutors made the explosive admission that the U.S. government does not have them. Quote, "The government does not possess the information the defendant seeks," prosecutor Jesse Liu wrote. This is because, Liu explained, CrowdStrike itself redacted the reports it provided to the government. At the direction of the DNC and DCCC's general counsel, Crowdstrike prepared 3 draft reports. Copies of these reports were subsequently produced voluntarily to the government by counsel for the DNC and DCCC. At the time of the voluntary production, counsel for the DNC told the government that the redacted material concerned steps taken to remediate the attack and to harden the DNC and DCCC systems against future attack. According to counsel, no redacted information concerned the attribution of the attack to Russian actors. In other words, the government allowed Crowdstrike and the Democratic Party's legal counsel to decide what it could and could not see in reports on Russian hacking, thereby surrendering the ability to independently vet their claims. The government also took Crowdstrike's word that, quote, no redacted information concerned the attribution of the attack to Russian actors. A former NSA technical director signed an affidavit during Stone's case that further confuses the origins of the DNC attack. Quote, according to an affidavit filed for Stone's defense by Binney, the speed transfer rate and the file formatting of the DNC data indicate that they were moved onto a storage device not hacked over the internet. In a rebuttal, Stone's prosecutors said that the file information flagged by Binney, quote, would be equally consistent with Russia intelligence officers using a thumb drive to transfer hacked materials among themselves after the hack took place, end quote. In an interview with Real Clear Investigations, Binney could not rule out that possibility, but conversely, the evidence laid out by Mueller is so incomplete and uncertain that Binney's theory cannot be ruled out either. The very fact that DOJ prosecutors, in their response to Binney, do not rule out his theory that a thumb drive was used to transfer the material is an acknowledgement in that direction, end quote. Binney signed a sworn affidavit that he believes that the DNC data was, quote, moved onto a storage device, not hacked over the internet. Here are a few key findings from his memorandum. Noble and Binney, 2017, quote, key findings indicate that the DNC data was copied onto a storage device at a speed that far exceeds an internet capability for a remote hack. Of equal importance, the forensics show that the copying and doctoring were performed on the east coast of the US. Thus far, mainstream media have ignored the findings of these independent studies. Noble and Binney, 2017. June 12, 2016, Assange announces WikiLeaks is about to publish, quote, emails related to Hillary Clinton. Noble and Binney, 2017. June 15, 2016. DNC contractor Crowdstrike, with a dubious professional record and multiple conflicts of interest, announces that malware has been found on the DNC server and claims there is evidence it was injected by Russians. Same report, June 15, 2016. On the same day, so-called Guccifer 2.0 affirms the DNC statement, claims responsibility for the quote-unquote hack, claims to be a WikiLeaks source, and posts a document that the forensics show was synthetically tainted with, quote, Russian fingerprints. We do not think that the June 12th and 15th timing was pure coincidence. Rather, it suggests the start of a preemptive move to associate Russia with anything WikiLeaks might have been about to publish and to, quote-unquote, show that it came from a Russian hack. The key event, July 5th, 2016. In the early evening Eastern Daylight Time, someone working in the EDT time zone with a computer directly connected to the DNC server or DNC local area network copied 1,976 megabytes of data in 87 seconds onto an external storage device. That speed is many times faster than what is physically possible with a hack. Back to Patel.
I was thinking about skipping this part, but it is important. It's only about 7 minutes worth of content too. So this is about the Seth Rich stuff. It is pretty notable. We'll just keep going.
This falls in line with a theory that has been floating around regarding who actually gave Julian Assange the data. Many believe it was Seth Rich, a former computer voting specialist from the DNC who was murdered on July 10th, 2016, just 5 days after Binney says the DNC data was downloaded and just 5 days before CrowdStrike announced the server was hacked by Russians. Here is what Newsweek reported about Seth Rich's murder. Quote, at 4:19 a.m., police patrolling nearby responded to the sound of gunfire in Bloomingdale and found Rich lying mortally wounded at a dark intersection, a block and a half from a red brick row house he shared with friends. He had multiple gunshot wounds in his back. About an hour and 40 minutes later, he died at a local hospital. Police have declined to say whether he was able to describe his assailants. The cops suspected Rich was a victim of an attempted robbery, one of many that plagued the neighborhood. Strangely, however, they found his wallet, credit cards, and cell phone on his body. The band of his wristwatch was torn, but not broken. End quote. The reason I think it's important to bring this up is Assange has publicly referenced Seth's murder through Twitter. August 9th, 2016, 10:58 a.m. WikiLeaks tweets, announce, WikiLeaks has decided to issue a US $20,000 reward for information leading to conviction for the murder of DNC staffer Seth Rich, as well as this short interview clip from August 9th, 2016.
Donald Trump has had a disastrous few weeks. If you look at the polls, he needs a miracle. In the American political lexicon, there's such a thing as the October surprise. The stuff that you're sitting on, is an October surprise in there? Do you even know what you're sitting on?
WikiLeaks never sits on material. Whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material, and often very significant risks. There's a 27-year-old works for the DNC who was shot in the back, murdered just a few weeks ago for unknown reasons as he was walking down the street in Washington. So
that was just a robbery, wasn't it?
No, there's no finding. So that's the sort of.
What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that our sources take risks, and they become concerned to see things occurring like that.
But was he one of your sources then? I mean,
we don't comment on who our sources are.
Why make the suggestion about a young guy being shot in the streets of Washington?
Because we have to understand.
You guys ever notice the thing behind him, the logo, the WikiLeaks logo is like dripping, like the drip thing?
How high this
isn't that a Q post?
States are.
Or is that just an anon thing? I don't know.
In the United States. And that our sources are, our sources face serious risks. That's why they come to us, so we can protect their anonymity.
But it's quite something to suggest a murder. That's basically what you're doing.
Well, that others have suggested that. We are investigating to understand what happened in that situation with Seth Rich. I think it is a concerning situation. There's not a conclusion yet. We wouldn't be willing to state a conclusion, but we are concerned about it. And more importantly, a variety of WikiLeaks sources are concerned when that kind of thing happens.
Yeah, guys, sorry. That echo was on Patrick's end 3 years ago. So nothing I can do.
The last piece of information I'd like to share here, and perhaps the most relevant considering the recent movements we're seeing from John Durham, relates to who provided a copy of Seth Rich's DNC laptop to the FBI as part of the murder investigation. It was the same law firm that employed Michael Sussman and who had brought in CrowdStrike while representing the DNC, none other than Perkins Coie. Rush. In May 2017, with Perkins Coie provided San Francisco FBI with a copy of Seth Rich's DNC laptop. The FBI submission document says the laptop was given to the FBI voluntarily, so I'm assuming that there is no search warrant for the laptop. San Francisco provided redacted for us at Special Counsel's office. Everything redacted. Finally, thank you. Signed, redacted. Let's do a recap before moving on. 1. Michael Sussman is a former DOJ lawyer and former, as of September 16, 2021, partner at Perkins Coie. 2. Perkins Coie was the law firm representing the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC. 3. Perkins Coie paid Fusion GPS to create the narrative that Trump was colluding with Russia. 4. Separately, Michael Sussman used Tech Executive 1 from Internet Company 1, which I believe are Sean Henry and CrowdStrike, to create narrative regarding Trump's ties to Russia through the Alpha Bank story. 5. Michael Sussman contracted CrowdStrike with the DNC for their cyber services for the DNC hack. 6. CrowdStrike used very shaky evidence to claim Russia hacked the DNC emails, again, creating narrative of Trump's ties to Russia. 7. A former NSA technical director studied the quote-unquote hack and claimed the DNC data was downloaded to a thumb drive. 8. Multiple data points, including Assange himself, lead to a deeper story behind what happened with Seth Rich. CrowdStrike played an integral role in creating the narrative that Trump had ties to Russia. I believe they also played an integral role in a few more recent events as well. The 2020 election. I don't need to once again go over the fact that Donald Trump won the election. We will see proof of that in due time. Instead, I'll go over some of the more technical details of the voting machines and security measures that were in place for the 2020 election as they pertain to Crowdstrike, the company heavily involved in the Spygate scandal. After digging around on Crowdstrike's website, I stumbled across something interesting from their blog. On July 30th, 2020, Sean Henry, yes, the same one we've already talked about, published a blog post titled Securing Elections Globally, How Crowdstrike is Helping. Here's the first paragraph, quote, as a global leader in protecting elections, we want to explain our perspective on election security issues and share some resources with the elections community. Free and fair elections are the cornerstone of democracies everywhere, and globally they have come under increasing threat by foreign adversaries who seek to manipulate or undermine their processes or outcomes. We believe that those in a position to contribute to election security have a responsibility to do so, and in that spirit, we're excited to launch a new website dedicated to providing expertise, advice, and support. End quote. This is the first time I've heard that Crowdstrike is a, quote, global leader in protecting elections. The blog continues to discuss their history of defeating adversaries and the current threat landscape, but towards the end, it gets to the really good stuff. Quote, recommendations and resources. Beyond planning to face the challenges posed by these threats, we encourage everyone to keep in mind a few additional items. First, we should take a broad view of what constitutes the elections ecosystem. Those engaged directly in election administration understand the context, sensitivity, and importance of their work. But those who support such organizations, or people who otherwise play a key role in the successful execution of elections, may not consider themselves targets or take the necessary steps to ensure security. People in roles within industries as diverse as television, general IT services, and shipping, for example, may ultimately play a part in successful elections.
This is where stuff starts to get confusing because we start to get into a little bit of the stuff we covered back in part 5 with the EIS and all those acronyms, the EISAC and Center for Internet Security, which we, again, get to later. There is something here, and I do not believe it's talked about enough. I don't even talk about it enough. But the fact that the Center for Internet Security set up all these cybersecurity tools, and CrowdStrike is one of the ones providing the EDR services on all of our election infrastructure in the United States, it is criminal. Criminal, especially after all this. This is why everything prior to this article was so important, prior in this article, all that context about them likely fabricating this Russia hack story. I mean, if they're willing to do that, and they have signed partnerships with the DNC and the DCCC, clearly Democrat biased. Sean Henry formerly worked underneath Comey, and I mean, all these, or Mueller, all these things. And they're providing cybersecurity on our election machines. It's the nefariousness here is off the charts. But yeah, it's about to get confusing. We're about to get into some of that stuff. But there is some hope at the end of it, because I do believe they've been caught. I'll let you be the judge.
Even before the COVID-19 crisis introduced a variety of new and complex challenges to election logistics, it has been essential to maintain strong security best practices. It's even more important now, and the best thing that those throughout the elections ecosystem can do is use a risk-informed approach to defense. It is absolutely essential to maintain the technical capability to detect an adversary and expel them from the network before they can accomplish actions on objectives. Speed is key. We recommend organizations implement the 1-10-60 rule. Detect adversary activity in your environment within 1 minute, investigate it within 10 minutes, and isolate the threat or eject the adversary within 60 minutes. And finally, everyone throughout the extended elections ecosystem should familiarize themselves with other resources that can help them plan for success. To that end, we're announcing today the launch of the CrowdStrike Cybersecurity and Election Security Resource Center. This site highlights some of the entities we've partnered with and programs that we're supporting, and shares helpful videos, talks, and assets produced by others making positive contributions in this space. End quote. Clicking on the Cybersecurity and Election Security Resource Center link brings you to the following page. CrowdStrike recommended programs. CrowdStrike supported programs can help strengthen the security posture of elections entities and campaigns. Learn about EI-ISAC election security initiatives. See resources available to the Center for Internet Security's Election Infrastructure, Information Sharing, and Analysis Center, EI-ISAC community. The above screenshot shows that Crowdstrike has partnered with the Center for Internet Security's, CIS, Election Infrastructure, Information Sharing, and Analysis Center, EI-ISAC. What is the Center for Internet Security?
I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but I'm going to just show you a quick glance. This is an article, my most recent article from this last December, which is crazy. That's my most recent article. I should probably figure out something to write about at some point. But the CIS, Center for Internet Security, I go through and tear them apart in here. Who is the head of it? Why they brought on CrowdStrike? I go much deeper into all this stuff. But it's crazy. This Gilligan guy, former Obama advisor. I mean, the ties here, the corruption here, it's disgusting. But yeah, you can skip ahead or you can wait till we get there. We'll get there eventually.
From the website About Us. The Center for Internet Security, Inc., CIS, makes the connected world a safer place for people, businesses, and governments through our core competencies of collaboration and innovation. We are a community-driven nonprofit responsible for the CIS controls and CIS benchmarks, globally recognized best practices for securing IT systems and data. We lead a global community of IT professionals to continuously evolve these standards and provide products and services to proactively safeguard against emerging threats. Our CIS hardened images provide secure, on-demand, scalable computing environments in the cloud. CIS is home to the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, MS-ISAC, the trusted resource for cyber threat prevention, protection, response, and recovery for U.S., state, local, tribal, and territorial government entities, and the Elections Infrastructure Information Sharing and Analysis Center, EI-ISAC, which supports the rapidly changing cybersecurity needs of U.S. elections offices. End quote. What is the EI-ISAC? When you click on the Learn About EI-ISAC Election Security Initiatives section, it takes you to the EI-ISAC page on the CIS website. Elections Infrastructure ISAC. The Elections Infrastructure Information Sharing and Analysis Center was established by the EIS-GCC to support the cybersecurity needs of the elections subsector. Through the EI-ISAC, election agencies will gain access to an elections-focused cyber defense suite, including sector-specific threat intelligence products, incident response and remediation, threat and vulnerability monitoring, cybersecurity awareness and training products, and tools for implementing security best practices. Elections, security tools, and resources. CIS and the Elections Infrastructure Information Sharing and Analysis Center provide many resources to support the cybersecurity needs of the election community. These resources include guidance on security best practices developed by a global community of cybersecurity experts that are tailored for the unique nature of election security. End quote. In Devolution Part 5, we discussed how the EISCC changed their name to the EISGCC. Here's a refresher from Devolution Part 5. Quote, so, because the EISCC operates under the framework of CIPAC, and is exempt from Public Law 92-463, exempt from oversight, they are classified as special government employees, and they have been certified that their, quote, services outweigh the potential for a conflict of interest created by the financial interests involved. This means our government knows there is a potential for conflict of interest created by the financial interest involved for members of the EISCC because the official responsible for the employee's appointment has to certify it. They know there is a conflict of interest for members of the EISCC, yet they allow it to operate without oversight. Why is this important? Scroll down and check out the member affiliations of the election.
I'm gonna skip ahead here because a lot of this stuff is recap from Part 5. I'm gonna skip ahead to here. So I didn't skip much. But a lot of it was a rehash of them providing the EDR services. But this is where it gets more relevant again.
The federal government has contracted the Center for Internet Security, CIS, to provide cybersecurity for hundreds, if not thousands, of United States, state, local, tribal, and territorial organizations. The CIS uses CrowdStrike to provide that cybersecurity. The same CrowdStrike with ties to the Obama administration. the same Crowdstrike who lied and covered up the DNC hack that was one of the launching pads for the Trump-Russia narrative. The same Crowdstrike which, I believe, fabricated the data behind the Alpha Bank story. Crowdstrike's cybersecurity product includes, quote, a downloadable object code component, software component. This means that any state or local government who used the CIS to provide cybersecurity allowed CrowdStrike's software to be downloaded directly into their machines and systems. Maybe it's just me. I would think that if a bad actor like China wanted to hack our entire election system, gaining access to it through a few entities like Perkins Coie and CrowdStrike might be the perfect way to do it. Despite a laundry list of conflicts of interest on behalf of both entities, our nation is being told repeatedly to simply ignore those conflicts and quote unquote trust that nothing nefarious occurred in the 2020 election when CrowdStrike themselves had direct access to voting machines throughout the country. This leads me to the final thing I would like to discuss: the SolarWinds hack. Let's look at the timeline. SolarWinds hack timeline, last updated March 28th, 2021. December 8th, 2020. How the discovery began. FireEye, a prominent cybersecurity firm, announced they were a victim to a nation-state attack. The security team reported their Red Team toolkit containing applications used by ethical hackers in penetration tests was stolen. December 13th, 2020. Initial detection. FireEye discovered a supply chain attack while it was investigating the nation-state attack on its own Red Team toolkit. The researchers stumbled across evidence that attackers entered a backdoor in the SolarWinds software, quote, trojanizing SolarWinds Orion business software updates to distribute malware, end quote. FireEye dubbed it Sunburst. This is
the part that's I'm still in belief of this theory that I'm about to go into, where I think the SolarWinds attack, cyber attack, wasn't actually a nefarious actor because of who they're trying to, you'll see here, but I still think this was the good guys, and this is what they used to actually monitor the stolen election.
December 13th, SolarWinds begins notifying customers, including a post on its Twitter account. Quote, SolarWinds asks all customers to upgrade immediately to Orion Platform version 2020.2.1 HF1 to address a security vulnerability, end quote. December 14th, SolarWinds files an SEC Form 8-K report stating in part that the company, quote, has been made aware of a cyber attack that inserted a vulnerability within its Orion monitoring products. On this date and next, the company issued 2 hotfix security patches to address the vulnerability. December 15th, 2020, victims named and timeline moves back. Wall Street Journal reported that the U.S. Commerce and Treasury Departments, the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, the National Institutes of Health, and the State Department were all affected. Various security officials and vendors expressed serious dismay that the attack was more widespread and began much earlier than expected. The initial attack date was now pegged to sometime in March 2020, which meant the attack had been underway for months before its detection. More technical details also began to emerge, illustrating how well the malicious activity was covered and why it was hard to detect. December 17th, 2020, new victims revealed. The Energy Department, Department of Energy, and National Nuclear Security Administration, NNSA, which maintains the U.S. nuclear weapons stockpile, were publicly named as victims of the attack. December 19th, 2020.
So I want you guys to remember here some of this timeline we're going through, but let me show you some of this. Okay, December 7th of 2020 is when Executive Order 13961 was signed and initiated. The very next day is when FireEye the prominent cybersecurity firm announced they were the victim of this nation state attack, right? In my part 16, which I know I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but I still, whenever we get to the timeline stuff, I always like to point out, like kind of stop and take it all in, because this is, it's just more proof to me that something bigger is going on, right? In part 16, I talk about this memo that John Ratcliffe wrote, where he basically, his views about the intelligence community were in opposition to, what the intelligence community did, like whether there was Russian hacking. And the person who told him or gave him the confidence or had the disputing view, the minority view on China, was the NIO for cyber. So this guy was like, I think there was hacking or there was interference in the election, the cyber guy. They go into this, and who is this cyber guy? It's Christopher Porter. He's the new NIO for cyber, and he was formerly the CTO at FireEye. Okay. So, I mean, this is a little bit later on. This is January 7th that this comes out, this report. But the guy who said, no, it was China who did it, was a FireEye guy. Now back to our article here. So Executive Order 13961, the most important executive order to the Devolution series, is December 7th. The very next day, FireEye is the one who announced that they were victim to this hack. Okay, so that's an interesting correlation in the timeline. Then fast forward to December 13th. Hold on, let me get to another part on this other side here. Sorry, December 12th. Let me go back to here. December 12th is when John Ratcliffe goes to that Army-Navy game. Chris Miller was there, all these people. The very next day, the 13th, is when Trump tweets about all the election being under protest. That's also when FireEye discovered more, like this is when it started to kick off. And then Dan Scavino, the historical moment post, even though it was from June. More Trump tweets about the election stuff. December 18th is the comments, and it just goes on and on and on from there. But this is a connection I hadn't actually put together previously before like this, realizing the significance, is the Executive Order 13961. Oh, also, so Executive Order 13961, December 7th. December 8th is when FireEye is the ones who discover the hack. And then December 9th is when Ratcliffe says Space Force will become the 18th member of the U.S. intel community. This December month, guys, in 2020 is so huge to the Devolution series. There's so much that happened. And it's hard for even me to like put it all together, even though I wrote all this stuff down. I don't connect it until later on. So that's an interesting thing to me. We'll talk about that on Wednesday.
Structure Subsector Coordinating Council's 2020 Charter. Try not to shit your pants. Member affiliations. Just a few names.
Sorry, I clicked the wrong window here. We're on this one.
200 more victims listed. Recorded Future, a cybersecurity firm, identified an additional list of government agencies and companies around the world that had also been attacked, but did not publicly reveal their identities. Using Twitter for his first comments on the attack, then U.S. President Donald Trump publicly suggested that China, not Russia, was the source, and also described the hack as a hoax. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and other senior members of the administration disputed these claims the same day, stating that, quote, we can say pretty clearly that it was the Russians that engaged in this activity, end quote.
See, I don't even believe that. To me, like with the kayfabe we've seen going on, this was them. Again, just my opinion. There's no like actual here. I can't like point to a piece of paper and tell you this is exactly what's going on. But if you're the Trump administration, by this point, you already know that you're going to be implementing something like devolution. You're going to allow them to steal the election. You're going to allow them to pull the bullshit on January 6th. And you're going to allow Joe Biden to be inaugurated unless they decide not to go through with it. But you already you're setting the stage for it. And you've probably been setting the stage for months at this point. So when it gets to this point, even though Trump is kind of like throwing some stuff out there, probably some of his asides, the actuals, as Burning Bright talks about, when you want to keep it on mission and like make sure the narrative that is moving forward, that needs to be moved forward for Trump to get out of there and devolve the government, you have Mike Pompeo come out and say, yeah, it was Russia. Because that's what the media and everybody wanted. They wanted the country they could attack is the same country, Russia, that they've accused Trump of colluding with. And so it's perfect for the left and their narrative, but it's also takes eyes away from who actually did it, which I believe was Cybercom or Space Force or whoever, NSA. And so this is like cover, if that makes sense.
Before we continue, I'd like to comment on this last paragraph. Here is what Trump tweeted. Quote, in a pair of tweets on Saturday, the president addressed the hack, which had been uncovered by the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, as previously reported. His silence on the matter had been widely noted. In his tweets, Trump seemed to downplay the severity of the attack, writing, quote, the cyber hack is far greater in the fake news media than in actuality. I have been fully briefed and everything is well under control. Discussing the possibility that it may be China, it could have also been a hit on our ridiculous voting machines during the election, which is now obvious that I won big, making it an even more corrupted embarrassment for the USA. And he tags Ratcliffe and Pompeo, December 19th, 2020. In an interview Friday with CNN, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said, I think it's the case that now we can say pretty clearly that it was the Russians that engaged in this activity, end quote. This isn't the first time President Trump has said one thing only later to be contradicted by Mike Pompeo. Quote from another time, asked if he had seen anything giving him a high degree of confidence that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was the source of the outbreak, the president replied, yes, I have. He refused to give detail. However, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo indicated he hadn't seen definitive evidence. We don't know precisely where it began, he said. We don't know if it came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. We don't know if it emanated from the wet market or yet some other place. We don't know those answers, end quote. Was Trump telling the truth about the virus originating from the Wuhan Institute of Virology? Was he also telling the truth about China and the SolarWinds hack? Did it have something to do with the election? Back to the timeline. December 31st, 2020, Microsoft says the Russian attackers breached some of its source code. The software giant said that the attackers could not modify code, products, or email, and they did not use Microsoft goods to attack other victims. By this point, the attacks are largely thought to, quote, have begun as far back as October 2019, when hackers breached the Texas company SolarWinds, end quote. January 5th, 2021, joint statement by FBI, CISA, ODNI, and NSA released. The Federal Bureau of Investigations, CISA, the Office of the National Director of Intelligence, and the National Security Agency jointly released a statement on the formation of the Cyber Unified Coordination Group, which, quote, indicates that an advanced, persistent threat actor, likely Russian in origin, is responsible for most or all of the recently discovered ongoing cyber compromises of both government and non-governmental networks. At this time, we believe this was and continues to be an intelligence gathering effort, end quote.
It's funny to me, like the way they talk about this hack being the most severe hack our country's ever seen, and like one of the most sophisticated hacks ever of all time. We really don't ever talk about it or what they got out of it. Or we haven't gotten any answers about any of this stuff. Yet just 2 weeks ago, we had, the story of Russia creating websites to, influence people in the election and then paying money to a media group and not even being able to control what they say, even though I hate the people in the media group. That's regardless. Like they'll talk about that all day and the threat that is and all these things, but they haven't said shit about this hack and what actually happened here. We don't have an answer.
January 6th, 2021. CISA issues supplemental guidance. CISA's supplemental guidance required U.S. government agencies that ran affected versions of SolarWinds Orion conduct forensic analysis. Those that accept the risk of running the software comply with certain hardening requirements and new reporting requirements by agency from department-level CIOs. The deadlines for the agency's CIO reports were Tuesday, January 19th, and Monday, January 25th, 2021. January 27th, 2021, CISA releases a report on Supernova, the malware, quote, that was deployed using a vulnerability in the Orion platform and after the Orion platform had been installed, end quote. January 29th, 2021, SolarWinds issues an advisory for both sunburst and supernova. February 19th, 2021, Biden administration declares intent to punish Russia for SolarWinds attack. Jake Sullivan, national security advisor, told CNN's Christiane Amanpour that President Joe Biden's administration would look at a broad range of responses after an investigation to further pinpoint the identities of the attackers.
Yeah, so that's interesting to me because this is like more pretext to what ended up happening with Russia actually invading Ukraine. Like, oh, we're going to look to punish them. And I don't know, it's just interesting, again, that this is all in the forefront here way back then. But I'm going to skip through the rest of this timeline because it's not super interesting, but I'm going to get to this point right here.
Startup Stairwell, and also the founder of Google's threat analysis group. Quote, a sophisticated adversary developed new techniques to compromise FireEye only to steal code that mimicked known attackers. Nothing there makes sense, he said. It's like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk robbing a bank at gunpoint. It's almost comical to imagine it happening. This is pure opinion or speculation on my part, but it seems like a waste of capability to develop novel technologies and techniques and steal tools that imitate known attackers. Part of me wonders if they went for something else, but it's impossible to say, and odds are FireEye doesn't even know yet. Similar to a museum heist, where someone breaks in to steal the Mona Lisa, but they maybe grab something from the gift shop on the way out. The first thing you'll notice missing is from the gift shop, right when you walk in.
That is such an interesting comment because we still haven't had full details of what went down with this hack. And it's because either they can't figure it out, which by this point it seems implausible, or they're like not allowed to figure it out, or they don't want people to know. You know, there's something here, and maybe this is another one of those loose ends we haven't heard the end of. And there's a lot of them out there, guys. I know there's Durham, the pedophilia stuff, Epstein stuff. Like, you can go on and on and on about the stories that we don't have closure to, and who knows which ones we will get closure to. Like some of the more detailed stuff like this, maybe not. Maybe we never get stuff. It probably depends on how this ending plays out. And when I say ending, I use that term loosely because it never really ends. It's never going to end. Like, our job in this is never going to end. They're not going to expose our elections and fix our elections. Then it's just like, okay, we can sit back and relax. No, we always got to keep our foot on the gas now. But it'll be interesting to see which stories we actually get some closure to.
Although it's speculation, the paragraph above is eye-opening. What might be the something else this group was after? It does appear that during the hack, they attempted to get something from Crowdstrike. December 24th, 2020, Cyberscoop. During the course of investigating the SolarWinds breach, Crowdstrike says Microsoft uncovered an attempt from unidentified hackers to read emails linked with the company. The hackers failed in their attempt to breach Crowdstrike, Chief Technology Officer Michael Sentonas said in a blog post Wednesday. Microsoft researchers first found the attempt, Sentonas said. Microsoft told Crowdstrike that, quote, several months ago, the Microsoft Azure account of a Microsoft reseller was making abnormal calls to Microsoft Cloud Application Programming Interfaces, APIs. The account managed Microsoft Office licenses for Crowdstrike.
Why would Crowdstrike, a cybersecurity firm, not have noticed this themselves? Like, why is Microsoft the ones that told them, like, hey, several months ago, somebody's trying to hack your shit? Like, why didn't Crowdstrike notice that? Like, this is their gig. This is their job. So this is weird.
The attackers tried to access emails, but as part of our secure IT architecture, Crowdstrike does not use Office 365 email, Sentonas said. We have conducted an extensive review of our production and internal environments and found no impact, Sentonas said. Crowdstrike conducted a thorough review into not only our Azure environment, but all of our infrastructure for the indicators shared by Microsoft. It was unclear if the suspected Russian hackers behind SolarWinds breach, which has compromised FireEye, Microsoft, and US government agencies, have also targeted CrowdStrike. It was also not clear what emails the hackers were interested in reading. Back to Patel. Why would somebody want to access CrowdStrike's emails? Something is happening here that we don't yet know the full scope of. One thing we know for sure is that this did impact the election through the Dominion voting system's machines. Here is an archived link to Dominion's web client portal from December 14th, 2020.
I'm sure by now everybody's familiar with this image.
Archived. User, password, login. The hack, basically, the client portal, got it. The hack that started sometime in March of 2020, but wasn't discovered until December of 2020, allowed hackers access to Dominion voting systems and therefore also to CrowdStrike, who had software on hundreds, if not thousands, of Dominion machines. I'm not a huge fan of speculation, so you'll have to forgive me because I'm about to ask some speculative questions. What if the SolarWinds hack wasn't a foreign adversary or some random hacking group? What if the most sophisticated hack ever seen was actually done by Cybercom and our military, and this is how they caught the election theft? What if this is how they acquired information on CrowdStrike while looking into things as far back as 2016? As much as I can't help but to speculate about what all of this might possibly mean, one doesn't need to indulge in speculation to see a clear pattern telling us that something much bigger and more dangerous to the deep state is at play here. The sheer length of the Durham investigation tells us definitively that although the media has tried to sweep these events under the rug, they have not gone away. Quite the opposite, in fact. These crimes are back in the spotlight. The political establishment may finally see some justice for what they have put Donald Trump through and for what they have put us through. Grab your popcorn, folks. The best is yet to come.
All right. Yeah, that was interesting, man. The CrowdStrike stuff. We'll get further into their shenanigans later on as we go. But there's a couple things that stuck out to me. One, the story of the Ukraine denying what CrowdStrike was trying to claim when they were trying to frame the Russia for the hack of the military stuff, the app or whatever. That's weird. I don't know what's going on there, but we're going to talk about that probably on Wednesday a little bit, just to kind of hash it out on air, see what we can come up with. And the other thing is that timeline thing of the day after EO 13961 being signed and issued and implemented is when the hack was discovered by the FireEye guy, and the FireEye is connected to Devo and DNI. I mean, the whole thing is just, it's fascinating. So I am live over on Locals right now. So if anybody wants to do a couple questions, I'll take a few before I have to go pick up my kids. So you can come on over, just hit the little join button at the bottom of the stream here. But make sure you guys hit that thumbs up. Tomorrow night, Power Hour, don't forget. I'll do another one of these streams on Thursday, probably around the same time. We'll be doing part 12, which is Playbook, all about the color revolution going on here in the United States. And it's a fascinating story. So make sure you guys check that out. And yeah, I'll head over to Locals for a little bit. And we'll, so come join. Thank you, everybody. Hit the thumbs up. And don't forget to support our sponsors, Strategic Business Advisors and City Zoo. We appreciate you both. Get the book, guys. It's awesome. All right, let me see if I can switch over to Locals only.